Federalist 12, Part 2, the ability of a country to pay taxes must always be proportioned in a great degree to the quantity of money in circulation and to the celerity with which it circulates. Commerce, contributing to both these objects, must of necessity render the payment of taxes easier and facilitate the requisite supplies to the treasury. The hereditary dominions of the Emperor of Germany contain a great extent of fertile, cultivated, and populous territory, a large proportion of which is situated in mild and luxuriant climates. In some parts of this territory are to be found the best gold and silver mines in Europe. And yet, from the want of fostering influence of commerce, that monarch can boast but slender revenues. He has several times been compelled to owe obligations to the pecuniary succors of other nations for the preservation of his essential interests, and is unable, upon the strength of his own resources, to sustain a long or continued war. He says, look at the German emperor. Because remember, back then, Germany was composed of many principalities. Many princes controlled different parts of that land. It wasn't a united Germany. He says the emperor, even though he had great land, great resources, access to gold and silver mines, but because he had not thought about how to raise revenue, money for running the government, anytime there was an emergency, anytime another king invaded his country, he had to go borrow money from others to be able to meet the demands of the war. So he's saying this and indirectly telling the people of the 13 states that if we do not unite, even though we have all these resources, if the British or the French or Spanish decide to invade us or to start a war, we will not be able to fight them. We won't have the money. We won't have the resources. So agriculture and commerce will be very good if we support them, and through them we will get money for revenue to run the government. But it is not in this aspect of the subject alone that the union will be seen to conduce to the purposes of revenue. There are other points of view in which its influence will appear more immediate and decisive. It is evident from the state of the country, from the habits of the people, from the experience we've had on this point itself, that it is impracticable to raise any very considerable sums by direct taxation. Tax laws have in vain been multiplied. We have had too many tax laws and have been in vain. They have not done anything for us. New methods to enforce the collection have in vain been tried. The public expectation has been uniformly disappointed, and the treasuries of the states have remained empty. The popular system of administration inherent in the nature of popular government, coinciding with the real scarcity of money incident to a languid and mutilated state of trade. When there's no trade, when there's little trade, when business is bad, when the economy is bad, he says money is not going to be circulating. Languid, almost dormant, sitting still. It's not doing anything. It's almost dead. I'll read the line again. The popular system of administration inherent in the nature of popular government, coinciding with the real scarcity of money incident to a languid and mutilated state of trade, has hitherto defeated every experiment for extensive collections, and has at length taught the different legislatures the folly of attempting them. When he says this, he is going back to what I have here on the map, vices of the political system of the United States. Remember one of the works that Madison did before he went to the Constitutional Convention. He studied in what had happened in the 13 states from 1776 till 1787. And he says, with experience, we have seen what happened in different states. They're financially, they cannot do everything right. They do many things wrong. During the War for Independence, we had to ask them for money, and most of the time they couldn't come up with it. So he says, we've seen what has happened in these 13 states, and we have learned from it. So folly of state legislatures. So if a state legislature tries to do the same thing over and over again with bad results, that's folly. No person acquainted with what happens in other countries will be surprised at this circumstance. In so opulent a nation as that of Britain, where direct taxes from superior wealth must be much more tolerable, and from the vigor of the government much more practicable than in America, far the greatest part of the national revenue is derived from taxes of the indirect kind, from imposts and from excises, duties on imported articles from a large branch of this latter description. So he says, even in England, where they know who the wealthy people are, and they have the means of going and asking them for taxes, direct taxes, he says they have found out that won't be enough to support the government. The best thing to do is to have indirect taxes at first available to the government. And the reason he says this is when they wrote the Articles of Confederation, their first constitution, one of the weaknesses was that they couldn't amend that constitution to make it where the first government could get their money from the import taxes. They had to ask the states. They had to make requisitions. But in this new constitution, they are saying that we will put a uniform tax on imports, and that would be the best way to get the money to run the government. So that is what he's trying to say here. He says that we have found that indirect taxes, and that would mean the taxes on the imports when they come in, so people won't see it, won't be touched by it immediately. He says that is the best form of tax for revenue to run the government.